Welcome to the Sharpe Show. Yes, it is Friday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern, which means you gotta look at my mug yet again and watch me talk and yap about things that are cool and sometimes not cool. But I know you love it. It doesn't matter. And since I know you love it, do me a favor, like, comment, share. Let people know this is happening. It's the only way we grow our media. It's the only way we get past all the things that try to block us from being heard. So please get out there, like, comment, and share to the best of your ability. If you want to show me that you love me, then follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook, subscribe to me on YouTube. And of course, if you got cash, go ahead, throw it at me. Patreon.com/Sharpeway. And let's move this thing forward. I am very lucky this evening, super lucky this evening. I have with me someone who stayed up until midnight. That's how much he loves us. A man himself, Dominic Frisby. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Larry. How's it going?
Good. You are an author. You are a comedian. You are a voice actor. And you're some kind of like economist guy too?
Yeah, I think I'm the world's only financial writer and comedian. I don't quite know how that happened, but it's one of those odd things. You know what life's like. This kind of stuff happens and you just sort of go along with it.
It is weird, absolutely. And then you're also like a blockchain Bitcoin guy, and you're like kind of like a libertarian anarchist, and you're kind of like a not. You're all kinds of things.
Yeah, well, I'm very much a libertarian, and I wrote back in 2013, 2014, what was supposed to be, it was the first book on Bitcoin, except it never got an international publishing deal. We only got a release because it was, I don't know how much you followed Bitcoin, but there was the first crypto winter, and it was published during the first crypto winter. And so none of the American publishers wanted to publish it. But it was, in the UK, it was the first book on Bitcoin, but it never got an international release. So.
And according to one of your videos, your mother still says it's the best.
My mother and you know, my
that's two
girlfriend, my kids. Me.
Oh my God, that's like 5.
What unanimity on this one?
I love this. We've got it all done. It's amazing. But I know you're libertarian. You actually have a libertarian anthem.
I do, and I did a show at the Edinburgh Festival last year called Libertarian Love Songs.
Okay.
And I would make everyone in the audience stand up and sing the national anthem of Libertaria at the beginning of the show.
Oh my God.
What I did is I Googled what is the best national anthem in the world.
Okay.
And do you know what is the best national anthem in the world according to Google?
The Russian national anthem.
No, Uruguay.
Really?
The Uruguay national anthem, and it goes on for like 10 minutes, and it's got like more key changes than any other national anthem. And I thought, but nobody really knows the Uruguay national anthem, but the Russian one comes in second. And the Russian national anthem was originally composed as the hymn of the Bolshevik Party.
Oh,
and
sure.
So I thought it'd be very funny, and most importantly of all, Larry, it's out of copyright. And so I thought it'd be very funny to put the words of the Libertarian national anthem to the hymn of the Bolshevik Party. And so that's what I did in my show, and I made everyone stand up and sing it. It's
I love
a good way of warming up the crowd.
All right.
I've got a feeling you're gonna play it now.
I'm going to put it on right now, so we're going to hear this. By the way, guys, now is the official, I've just deemed it so, Libertarian National Anthem.
Arise, libertarians, above totalitarians. Our guide is the mighty invisible hand. Reject state controllers, collectors, patrollers. Our choices are better than government plans.
I have to pause it here. I'm sorry. I know everyone's enjoying it, but I have to pause this. How long did this take you to write? Was this like you threw it together? I mean,
no.
This had to fit.
It like in comedy, people who take old songs and reword them are slightly frowned upon.
Yes.
It's considered sort of cheap.
Yes.
But and that's effectively what I'm doing here. But actually, Larry, this took, like, I've written 3 books and many stand-up routines. This took me longer than anything I've ever written ever. It took me about probably 4 or 5 months.
Wow.
And it was like, fine, because what I had to do is I had to write all the things that libertarians stand for.
Right.
And, you know, libertarian references. Then I had to find rhymes. Then you had to sort of tweak it so the rhythm hits the national anthem. And then it was like a huge mathematical puzzle, making sure it all worked. But I'm pretty pleased with it. But it was a lot of work.
All right.
And
let
in terms
me.
of my investment, I haven't recouped my investment on this one.
Okay. I'm going to give a little bit more. A little bit more.
Taxation is a form of theft. Free markets and free trade are best. Free speech, free movement, free minds and free choice. Our actions are all voluntary, not coerced or compulsory. What we abhor, socialism does not work.
All right. You had to squeeze that last one in a bit, right? That was good.
Yeah,
I like that.
The socialism doesn't work.
Yeah, yes, that's a good one, though. I love that. You know that when socialists are listening to this, you make their heads explode.
Say that again?
I said when socialists listen to this, you're going to make their heads explode.
Yeah, I know. And it worked quite well in the show because you probably don't know this, but in the Edinburgh Festival, most of the audiences are pretty left-wing. And so you would say, in order to get them on side, it's quite easy preaching to the converted, but when you've got people who are cynical about what you're thinking, you've got to kind of go in gently. So I had to say things that, you know, maybe most people who believe in large government would agree with in principle, and then sort of sneak in the libertarian stuff through the back door. Kind of.
I love that, right? I say this all the time when I talk about communicating libertarian ideals. I talk about the idea of being radical enough that people remember it, but still being familiar enough that they'll still hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a tough
spot. You know, most libertarian principles, it's very, very hard to disagree with any of them. You know, most libertarian people want everyone to be rich. They want humankind to advance. They want everyone to be happy. They want everyone to be free. And, you know, it's very hard to disagree with any of these things. Where the disagreement comes is that most people instinctively think, and I think this is because of, you know, hundreds of years of government propaganda where governments have said, this is the problem and we're going to fix it. Most people think that, you know, if we want good healthcare or good education, it's up to the government to supply it. They don't realize that it doesn't work that way. So
absolutely,
you know, the NHS is here in the UK. I mean, your healthcare is a bit different, but the NHS, which provides our healthcare in the UK, is basically a religion.
And
if
yes.
you say actually the NHS is not the best way to provide the best possible healthcare to the most possible people at the lowest possible price, you are committing blasphemy.
Yes, I always say that you are when you go against the government, you're not actually committing a crime. Your crime is actually heresy. That's really your crime. It's heresy.
It's heresy, and you will be excommunicated.
Yes.
And so you know you risk this happening. So you have to sort of. But in fact, the real heresy is worshipping a religion that doesn't deliver the best possible healthcare at the best possible price and so on. But anyway. So you have to be a bit canny about how you feed your information through.
Absolutely. And I think song is good. Let me keep the song going.
No
correlation, no self-confiscation, no names in the trough at the gravy to drink, no temptation to brainwash our nation, no aspects to blame,
Now, what drives me crazy about this is with the COVID crisis that's happening now, this actually fits. And you didn't know that was happening when you wrote this.
Yeah, no, I wrote this long before COVID was ever a thing. But yeah, I mean, talk about, it's difficult to know where to start with COVID. But,
Yes.
but you know, I mean, you just go, where do you start? But the idea that the government knows better than you, and that the government response is better than the amalgamation of, you know, 1 million, or in the case of America, 350 million individuals making their own minds about something.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's just been a total. Like,
Absolutely.
If you're not a libertarian now, having seen how governments have handled COVID, I don't think you'll ever be a libertarian.
It's a valid point. All right, let me keep going.
Risk on your fiat currency. Gold and Bitcoin is our money. We live and let live. We take responsibility. Life, love, and liberty. Leave us alone. Let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Just think how you covered basically every single piece of libertarian theory in one song. Fiat currency, life, love, liberty, government control. All I can say, my friend, is well done. Well done.
Thank you. Let me ask you a question, Larry, because
Go ahead.
looking at the responses to the song, the one line that has upset people, I think somewhere in the middle of the song, I say, free markets, free minds, free trade, free movement, and free choice, or something. I can't remember what the exact line is, but it's something like that. And a lot of the line that's attracted the most criticism is free movement.
Yes.
And this really divides libertarians, this idea
100%.
of free movement. Now, I take the line that, you know, if you want free minds and free choice and free markets, then you've got to have free movement. They're all part of the same thing. And one of the lines that I didn't put in the song was something, no borders, nobody giving orders.
Yep.
And that might have clarified it, but this it's
no, but that
amazing
makes
how
it
free
worse.
movement divides it. Now,
That makes it. I'm glad you didn't do that. In America, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in America, one of the biggest issues we fight over is the idea of open borders. We are, and you know, our President Trump, he is about building walls. He does not want anybody coming across, and these Mexicans are all bad people, right? They're all rapists, and right, that's his whole line, right? So without question, open borders is a big deal, and a lot of people, particularly those on the right, but on the left also, but particularly on the right, when you start talking open borders, they start running away from libertarians. You're right. I think it's better. You said free movement. That's a little bit stealthy.
it is a bit stealthy. But it's funny. That's the one that, like, people say they're libertarian, but if you're true libertarian, the thing is, it's back to the old Milton Friedman thing: is if you want an expansive welfare state, then you can't have open borders. If you have no welfare state, then open borders work fine. So that's the basic issue. But obviously, as libertarians, we don't agree with welfare state.
But the issue that I find, right, and you probably know what I've done, right? I ran for office. I consider myself a politician. And I divvy it up in the movement into many different groups, right? I divvied up into activists, politicians, donors, and also now I've been rethinking this, also volunteers, right? 4 different types of people who work in this movement. The activist has to yell open borders. You're an activist. I get it. But the politician doesn't have to, right? The activist's job is to get the population to understand that this is an important issue. You should care about this. It matters. It's what an activist does. But a politician is supposed to look at what the people care about, they're trying to represent, and then find a libertarian solution for it. right? Find a solution that is community or commerce-based and not government-based. So when I talk about, the open borders piece, I'm not an open borders libertarian. Not because I don't agree conceptually. Of course I conceptually agree. But practically, the American population is simply not going to accept it. It's a non-starter for the American population. So I instead talk about a lot freer, easier immigration. Things like going back to the idea of an Ellis Island, right? Having Ellis Islands instead, which is what we had in our future when America had basically an open borders policy, right? It was an Ellis Island. You go through that hub to gain some control. So that's kind of where I've gone, because I think your point's a valid one. Of course, I want to believe it, but I have to be realistic in talking to people.
Yeah, I think the world basically had open borders until about 1914. And that was sort of First World War was when that was the end of open borders. When I was I took my kids round Texas a couple of years ago. And we flew into Houston and we hired a car. And this is a big deal. We're English. We don't have guns in England. And within 48 hours of our having landed in Houston, my kids had eaten steak, ridden a horse, driven a car, and shot a gun.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And we had fun, and we drove all around Texas. And this would have been, I can't remember if it was 2016 or 2017, but it was when the whole hype about the wall was going on, the wall with Mexico. We went to Big Bend National Park, which is on the border with Mexico. And we went in this dinghy and we went down the Rio Grande for a couple of days in this dinghy. And it was great fun. And the Rio Grande runs across the border with Mexico. Yep. And so while we were in the dinghy, most days, it was quite hot. It was the middle of summer. So we'd swim in the river. And we'd just swim across the river to the border with Mexico. Yep. And we'd take photos. We'd go, hey, I'm in Mexico. Right. And then we'd swim back. And we were like, hey, we're in the US. And I was thinking, why do you even need a wall when it's that easy to cross the river?
Well, you got to remember something, right? I mean, this is politics is not logical. Politics is emotional. And the wall is an emotional barrier. That's what it is. It's I feel safe now. See, I have a wall. In fact, the average American has no idea what the southern border looks like. We have no idea if there's a wall there or not. If Trump tells us there's a wall there, we believe there's a wall there. If Trump tells us there's not a wall there, then there's not a wall there. We've always been at war with East Asia or whoever we've been at war with. I don't know. Right? Whatever the government tells us, that's what we believe. We don't know. Absolutely. But you're talking about land, and someone asked me immediately, they said, talk about Georgism. So I want to show your video about land value, which to many libertarians, this is also controversial, right? A lot of libertarians, they don't like this. So let's talk about this one. This is a short one. All right.
Income tax, a tax most is the biggest source of government revenue worldwide. But in taxing your labor, the government is taking what you have worked for. Perhaps what you have earned should be yours to keep. There are many forms of wealth that are unearned. Why not tax these instead? Take land, for example. Nobody made the land, nature gave it to us. You build on it, you improve it, but the land itself was always there.
Now, the piece I want to bring up here is you talk about the idea of taxing something, right? There's many other ways of taxing things that aren't earned. But this video, you only talk about land. Are there other things, or is it really just land?
Well, I've just written a book actually called Daylight Robbery, which is all about the past, the present, and the future of taxation. And in the final chapter, I sort of offer some solutions. Okay. And the theory of my book is that you design a society by the way you tax it.
Okay.
And tax is power. Tax is control. The history of taxation is as old as the history of civilization itself.
Sure.
And if you tax people on their labor,
yeah,
you are penalizing productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I argue largely against income tax, and people wonder why there's such a big wealth loss. And when you're a young person starting out, you've got nothing. The only thing you have is your labor.
Mm-hmm.
And we tax labor heavily and constantly, whereas we don't tax assets. And it tends to be the older generation that own assets. So if you're young and you're starting out and you're trying to, the reason we have this wealth gap between young and old and across generations is because of the way we tax people. And the beauty of taxing land instead of labor is that it's a much transfer. By the way, I regard inflation as a form of tax and debt as a form of tax as well.
Sure.
They're both ways of extracting wealth from people. They're stealth taxes we only pay. And
okay, so I see where you're going. Let me move. I'm going to go back to this so we can finish up. I just wanted to touch that piece real fast.
Go on.
So let us consider only the unimproved value of the land, which is easy to assess. Desirable land in city centres commands an extremely high value. Remote rural land a very low value. Land has value because of the needs of the community. If you want a plot of land to be exclusively yours, and you want the community to respect that title and the government to protect it, then some of the unimproved value of the land should be shared with the community.
Did you just say socialism? I'm teasing you. I'm totally teasing you. But my point here is that there's the idea of land tax. A lot of people would say that land tax is a form of, slavery now, because if you never own the land, right? You never actually own the land because there's no opt-out in that piece. Where do you go there?
I have a lot of sympathy with that. And, if land becomes a liability rather than an asset,
yep,
then that's a problem. I do have a lot of sympathy with that view. But the beauty of land, if Henry George argued, he called it the single tax, and there would be no taxes. And the idea is that nobody made the land, nature put it there.
Right.
And anything you put on the land, so if you build a mine or a farm or a beautiful house, whatever it is, that is yours. And that is the result of your endeavor. But it's the land in its unimproved state. Now, the main reason I argue for it so keenly is that, by the way, I don't think it ever stands a chance of happening in the real world, because there's too much vested interest against it. But the reason I argue for it so keenly is that unlike inflation and debt and income tax and all these other forms of taxes, it is a transparent form of tax.
Okay.
If landowners pay this tax and governments are saying, no, we're spending this much and therefore you have to pay this much tax, and it's the only form of tax there is, it makes government spending much more transparent. So it's a much more effective way of holding your government to account. And so that's almost the main reason why I argue for it. And actually Milton Friedman, who's obviously a big hero of mine, used to call it the least bad tax.
Ah, the least bad tax.
Yeah. And so that's a good way of looking at it. What I think is going to happen, certainly
Dominic, you're breaking up a lot. Is it possible for you to come back on again? Just kind of get out and come back on. See if you can get a better connection.
Log out.
While he's doing that, I'm going to keep watching.
Land value tax should replace all other taxes. No VAT, no duties, no council or local taxes, no income tax. What you earn, you keep. What is unearned is shared.
You share what's unearned.
Currently, land, particularly in city centres, is a luxury of the few. In the developed world, over 80% of the land is owned by less than 1% of the people.
I hear this all the time. People upset about, very few people owning so much, right? I hear that constantly. Very few people owning so much, and the masses of people not owning enough. I hear that constantly. So I think it is an issue. Are you back now?
Can
you hear me now?
I'm hoping it's my internet. Yeah, I'm using it. I can hear you. I'm using a different internet connection, so hopefully this is better.
So we were just talking about how so many people, a little bit, but you're still cracking up a bit. Are you using a phone or are you using a computer?
I'm using my phone.
Ah, gotcha. Usually people use computers. That's why I was thinking. Okay, it's all right. The best you have, you have. You got what you got. That's how it works. It's COVID. We do what we got to do. So
I've got a computer, but the connection's the same.
Okay.
I'm optimistic.
I love it,
Larry.
So we're talking now about how 80% of the people own not much of the land and 1% own so much, that kind of piece. So let me finish that right there. So we're talking about it. This is a complaint we hear constantly, more from the left than from the right, but constantly.
If they want the sole use of that land, then share some of its unearned value. Let us redistribute the unearned wealth in the land from the few to the many.
Now, that, of course, sounds super scary, doesn't it? We're redistributing land, redistributing land, redistributing wealth. This sounds like that, we're going back to the Soviets here and the Bolsheviks are coming down to take our land. It sounds scary.
It does sound scary. But remember, I framed this. This is to appeal to statists.
Ah, okay.
And what you actually have to remember is that the extraordinary asset price inflation that we've seen, like you live in New York, I'm guessing. Yep. New York property's been, I imagine, I don't actually follow New York property, but I imagine it's been a superlative investment over the last 25 years.
Absolutely,
but
yes.
Really, the reason that New York property has gone up so much is because, not so much because New York property is that special, but because the US dollar has been debased and there's extraordinary debt in the system. And all the money printing that's gone on has made its way into the financial sector, and from the financial sector it's gone into the property in which the financial sector mostly lives. So New York property price inflation has been a consequence of zero interest rate policies, quantitative easing, and all those things. Now, when you have land value tax, that it puts as soon as the value of New York property starts going up and there's inflationary amounts of tax to pay, then people are like, hang on a minute, I'm not paying that. And again, it's just a more effective way of holding the system to account. So it puts a brake on money printing and quantitative easing and all those other means of extracting wealth that goes on.
So what you're saying is you don't want my house to be worth a lot.
From the rich to the poor. What's that?
You don't want my house to be worth a lot. That's what you're telling me.
I want your house to be worth fortunes.
Okay,
I want your house to be worth fortunes, but I want the land underneath your house, which you made your house nice, Larry. I watched you. I've seen videos of you doing DIY on your house. I saw you painting it. It's made impressive. It nice. All that wealth is yours to keep. But the land underneath it, just because they build a station up the road from your house, and so loads of people want to live in your street because there's a station up the road, you had nothing to do with that. So that particular wealth shouldn't necessarily be yours. But anyway, so that's the principle.
Okay.
again, so that principle appeals to the authoritarian left, the socialist
That's true.
left. But in fact, what it creates is this means of holding governments to account, in particular government spending to account. So I'm cheating.
I got it.
I'm appealing to that spread the wealth thing, but actually we're holding government to account.
Okay, so it's stealth again. You are the stealthy guy. I like it. All right, let's wrap this up.
It would mean a fundamental shift in the way society works, but surely a welcome shift. Hard work and endeavor are rewarded. Unearned wealth is not.
Look at that. I mean, the statists are going to love this. We fooled them. I love it. It's amazing. I love it. So
They
that's
love
actually
it.
good.
The statists love land value tax. And remember, land value tax is the single tax. So there's no other tax to pay.
Do you know if there's any group that's doing this? Do you know?
They have it. In Hong Kong.
Okay.
Which was, the sort of low tax haven of the second half of the 20th century, extraordinary growth, eclipsing its neighbors, blah, blah, blah. Tax never exceeded 15% of GDP. But 45% of Hong Kong tax revenue came from land value tax.
Got it.
So it worked. And I think Botswana has land value tax. And economically, Botswana eclipses its neighbors.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So you talk a lot about money, and I want to bring up the idea of this fiat currency piece, which you are really against fiat currency. I get you.
I am.
Yeah. So I want to bring this one up if I could too.
Once upon a time, we used gold, or paper that represented safely stored gold, as money.
Yes.
It worked well for thousands of years. Partly because gold is independent, and partly because it keeps its purchasing power. An ounce of gold buys you as much food, clothing, and energy as it did 50, or 150, or 1,550 years ago.
How do we know that stat? When I saw that, I thought, that's an odd stat. How would we know that's true?
I'll tell you how we know that's true. There's various means by which we know it's true. But there's all sorts of ancient references to, for example, there's a reference in the Old Testament to King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon buying, I think it was 350 loaves of bread with a gold coin, with an ounce of gold. But there's all sorts of references to how much, also silver as well. You can find out how much people were paid at different times in history, because silver was always money. And for example, another example that I was sent by an Islamic historian friend of mine was that a gold dinar, which was about a quarter of an ounce of gold, bought a lamb in 600 AD in the time of in the time of Muhammad. And they're all, you could just of all ancient records, tax records are the best preserved of all ancient records for obvious reasons.
Yep.
Because people, and so it's possible to find out and for this reason, gold's a wonderful unit of account, because you can compare prices over time in gold and right back almost to the time of ancient Babylon.
Look at that.
And,
okay.
and you can
so you didn't make this up.
No. That's
okay.
It's proven. That is genuine.
I like that. Okay. The rest is garbage. That's genuine. Okay, fine. No worries.
Compare that to modern money, which seems to buy you less and less each year.
Yes.
100 years ago, when the Federal Reserve Bank was formed, $1 would buy you this much oil.
Look at that.
50 years ago, it bought you this much. Now, it buys you this much. That's not very much, is it? In fact, in the 100 years since the Federal Reserve Bank was formed to protect the currency...
I have to tell the story to protect the currency. I think, Dominic, you will enjoy this story. One of the things I do for a living, when my overlord in New York State allows me to work, right now he does not, so I have to stay home. But when my overlord allows me to work and make a living, I do training. I train people in leadership and marketing and communications, all kind of stuff. One of the groups that I was training once was a New York City agency. And while I was at that agency, it's a group of educated and credentialed adults. Youngest is probably 30, oldest is maybe 60 in that area, mostly men, but also women. And that's the room I'm talking to. I never talk about politics unless it's a break or lunch. It's one of those breaks, and I hear one of the guys, he says to his friend, "Oh, I'm so glad that we have the Fed. Without the Fed, during the crash, we'd have been destroyed. Luckily, the Fed saved us during the crash." He says this, and the rest of the people around him are like, yeah, nodding their heads yes. So all I do is I just say to them, do you guys know that the Fed's a private bank? It's basically a banking cartel. It's just a private bank. Do you guys know that? Every one of them, and I want to be very clear, educated, credentialed adults who work for the government, not one of them knew that. In fact, most of them thought I was crazy. They said to me literally, no, stop, of course not. No, it says federal, right? No, of course not, right? Of course not. And all I said to them was, no worries, Google it. You got your phones? This is probably 5 years ago. See if you have good phones, Google it. They Google it. And all of a sudden you hear, what? What? Yeah. Do you know that the Fed can just magically make money? They went, no, it doesn't. Still, I had just shown them that I was correct 30 seconds earlier. And they still, all of them said, no, that's not true. I said, Google it. And they Googled it. Oh my God. The concept behind the Fed and the feeling that Americans have behind it, it's very strong. And we have a lot of work to do. They don't know what it is. I've actually asked people, do you think we need a central bank? And they say, what's a central bank? Or I say, do you think we need a central bank? And they say, we don't need that. We have a Fed. No idea.
People still think that money's backed by gold.
Correct.
They still think that in some vault somewhere you could go and redeem your paper for gold.
It's Fort Knox.
They really do.
They believe it's in Fort Knox. I'm serious. They believe it's in Fort Knox. They think that's where the gold is. And so I can get my dollars in Fort Knox. They believe that. You're totally correct. I just had to tell that story before we kept going. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So the purchasing power of the dollar has fallen by this much.
Sorry, hold on. Go ahead.
I was going to tell you my Fort Knox joke.
Go ahead, please.
So the head of U.S. security, who was the U.S. security, the FBI. The head of the FBI goes to Donald Trump and it says, Mr. President, there's no gold in Fort Knox. And Donald Trump says, what do you mean there's no gold in Fort Knox? And the head of the FBI says, there's no gold in Fort Knox. And Donald Trump says, double the guard.
I love that. That's amazing. Okay, just so you know, I'm so stealing that when I do events. I am stealing that joke. Okay. And I might give it credit. Probably not, but I might.
Whatever. I heard it from someone else. I didn't write it.
Why did governments stop using gold? In 1914, the British and German governments were committed to various spending programs and World War I, a war that probably needn't have happened.
I love that you said that. I bring this up constantly. The war probably didn't need to happen. I took my daughter, who is 16 now. I took her to see the movie 1917. And we also watched All Quiet on the Western Front from the 1970s, that version, not the 30s version, that version. And the thing that she saw was the same. We also watched Gallipoli. And so we watched all those 3 World War I movies. And the thing that was common, she realized, is nobody knew why they were fighting.
Yeah.
That was the common thing. Nobody knew, whether it was Turks, Australians, British, French, Germans, doesn't matter. No one knows why we're fighting.
And that war destroyed Western Europe.
Yep, absolutely.
And neither had the money or gold to pay for it. So they took their countries off the gold standard and, free of its restraints, printed the money they needed.
Easy day.
In 1971, the American government was committed to various spending programs
What?
and Vietnam,
Look at
a
that.
war that probably needn't have happened.
Okay, we can stop the probably on that one. Definitely should not have happened. Vietnam should not have happened. Definitely on that one. Sorry, I'm an American. That one's for me. No, should not have happened.
And it didn't have the money or gold to pay for it. So it took America off the gold standard and, free of its restraints, printed the money it needed. Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
If governments didn't have the power to run up deficits, these wars could never have happened. There wasn't the gold to pay for them. The bill is eventually paid by the people through the stealth tax that is currency devaluation by inflation. Now the world operates under a system of money and credit known as fiat. It's the law that what we use as money be money. The government and its banking agencies have the power to issue money, but no one else may do so.
Now, there's a couple of things here that I like about this. The first one is you've basically blamed almost all of the world's ills on the Fed. That's basically, you blamed everything, right? War, debt,
the Fed
poverty, everything's based upon this one thing.
Yeah, the Fed is the key player. But I blame most of the world's ills on fiat money. And if we could fix tax and fiat money, the world will be a much better place. And those are the two. And they're
I have to say this again because nobody says it, so I've got to repeat it. If we could fix tax and fiat money, the world would be a better place. Is that what you just said?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's the zero patient. Everything starts from there. And
there we go.
You know what I mean? You know, in a zombie film, or you got this film and the virus spreads, but if the hero can get to the zero patient and kill the zero patient, or the zero patient's got the antidote, this is idea of the zero patient. It's tax and fiat money.
There we go. I like that. You have. That's the thing. But no one says that. You don't hear that. That's not what people talk about. In fact, when you talk about that, this is the hardest part I think that we have when we talk like this. It sounds like all we care about is money, when in reality, we're actually talking about all of society and culture. We're talking about lives.
Yeah, I care about the system of money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. I mean, I want to earn money. I want to be stinking rich. Of course I do. Who doesn't? But I care. But I also, I give money away and I'm stupid and I'm irresponsible with money. I care far more about the system of money than I do about, 50 or 100 quid or whatever,
I love it. All right. Let me keep going.
Unlike gold, of which there is a finite amount in the world, with this fiat system, there is no limit to how much money can be created.
Keep going.
So inflation becomes inevitable. Look at the mess the UK and Germany got the world into after leaving the gold standard in 1914. World War I, German reparations, Weimar inflation, the rise of Hitler, and so on.
You just blamed Nazis. I mean, you just blamed Nazis on fiat currency. I love it.
It could not have happened if they'd stayed on the gold standard. It could not. There we go.
See that?
Look at the mess the world has got itself into since 1971, when this fiat system became the global norm. An endless sea of wars, debt, poverty, social inequality, economic bubbles, rampant consumerism, and environmental rape. None of which could ever have happened to anything like the same extent, with that little bit of discipline and restraint imposed by gold. The ability to issue money is too much power for governments, banks, anybody, however well-intentioned. The best way to stop the abuse of power is to spread it as thinly and widely as possible. That's why we need to get back to a sound system of money. Unlike any bank, any corporation, any government, or any body, gold really is independent.
Now, I've heard this before. You aren't the only person to talk about the idea of gold, but my gut tells me that ship has sailed, that we're never going to go back to gold. I could be wrong, but my gut tells me we're not. And I think, and I know you like this part because you wrote the book on Bitcoin, I think cryptocurrency is our answer where gold simply won't, because I feel like the average person says, Gold, that's like ancient Rome. We don't do that. We don't do that. But, cryptocurrency, that's new cool money. That's my credit card. That's the cool thing that I could accept. And I actually think that in the future, we're going to find more people being more open to cryptocurrency than gold. You think I'm wrong?
I don't know.
Okay.
And it's something I think about a lot. And do you know what, Larry? It's probably at least 7 or 8 years since I watched that video.
Mm-hmm.
And just watching it then on your program, I was like, fuck me, excuse my language.
No, go ahead.
I was actually quite proud of it because I forgot how powerful that message is. And I've recently been working on a book with a chap called James Turk, who's a big gold bug. And I was taking your line that, you know, for hundreds, thousands of years, the horse was the natural form of transport. And we always use horses. And then along came, you know, whoever it was, Mr. Ford or Mr. Mercedes, whoever it was invented the car. And with that little invention, you know, we no longer use the horse.
Right.
Now, is gold to money what the horse is to transport? And you could say that it is. And I would sort of make that argument to James Turk, and he just was like, no, it is natural money. If you look at population growth and new gold supply, they grow at the same rate. And I think gold will always be the money of last resort. So it might not be, it's never been money that you buy and sell stuff on a daily basis with. It's always been more a store of wealth than it is a medium of exchange. And I think it will always have that role. And it really is the one way. It really is money with no liability. Like even something like Bitcoin, you know, Bitcoin is a wonderful form of money, and it's modeled on gold. It's supposed to be a digital replication of what gold is, but you still are beholden to the Bitcoin system. Whereas gold, you are truly, you have the gold in your hand, and there is no liability there whatsoever. And it's the only asset there is that has that finality to it. So let's say you were paying me to appear on your podcast. And so I did this podcast and you owe me $100, and then you give me $100 for appearing on your podcast. You know, I get that $100, but that $100 is still, you know, the liability of the US government, whatever it is. But if you paid me an eighth of gold to appear on your podcast, and you gave me that money, and that eighth of ounce of gold was in my hand, there'd be finality to that transaction.
Yeah, no,
so
I get it, but the reality of it is
that purity of that.
How in our modern world, right? How in the world am I going to get an eighth of an ounce of gold to you, right? You're literally what, 6,000 miles away, or however many, 5,000 miles away from us, right? I'm not going to get that to you. It'll cost me more to get the ounce to you than anything else. So I've got to use some form of something. And right now, what most Americans, most people in the modern world, industrialized world, it's bits, it's numbers, it's ones and zeros. That's our money.
You could send it by pay. In fact, the easiest way to pay me would be by Bitcoin or one of the other cryptocurrencies. But there are many cryptocurrencies that represents gold stored somewhere. So you could send me, you know, you could say that this eighth of an ounce of gold that you own in this vault, is the ownership of that is transferred to me. So you could transfer that to me, but it wouldn't have the same finality as a piece of gold transferred from your hand to my hand. But even so, you could transfer ownership of gold.
So you do think we could go back to gold?
No, I think we're going into a world where I'm reluctant to be, like, I've heard so many people for so long, Larry, talk about the end of the US dollar. We're going into hyperinflation. We're printing all this money. It's going to be, and it just never happens. And I've just heard that story so many times.
It's because we keep fighting wars. Remember, the US dollar is backed by the US military. And as long as we can find proxy wars, and our newest proxy wars will probably be in Africa, is my assumption, fighting Chinese in Africa or Russians in Libya or something like that. We'll fight some proxy war someplace, which will show our power, and you'll take our dollar or we'll bomb you. So I think as long as we can do that, that's true. But the second we stop bombing people, maybe not.
I hear that argument, and I get that the US dollar is backed by the US military. But even so, there have been so many clever people predicting the end of the US dollar and hyperinflation for so long that I've sort of grown tired of that argument, no matter how convincing it is. But at the moment, we're looking, something weird has happened in 2020 where there's just been this huge loss of faith in governments, institutions, the media, government experts, government advice. And I really don't think it's going to be that long before that extends to government currency. And we start losing faith in that. And there's been this, how the US dollar has lost 99% of its purchasing power over the last 100 years. So it's been this steady erosion, but there's going to be an acceleration. And I rather think we're moving into a world rather than there is one fixed currency and it's gold. We're moving into a more Hayekian situation of all sorts of different currencies. And government currencies will have to compete with private currencies and cryptocurrencies and gold and silver. And, I think corporations, Walmart and Amazon and, these guys where we shop a lot, they're going to be issuing their own currencies. Amazon,
well, they kind of already have it.
They already do.
They have point systems and something bucks and things like that. Yeah.
And Facebook is introduced or trying to introduce its
I remember that.
Libra coin. And so I'm the potential of Libra coin is enormous. Money that
I want to do something else. You talk about this. I think you're right. And I think for me to fix the destruction that is New York State. New York State doesn't have a Fed, so it can't magically make money. It just has lots of debt it has to fix. It was $400 billion in debt. It had a $6 billion deficit. Now, since COVID, has a $60 billion deficit, and that's just for New York State. To fix that, we're never going to pay that back. That's not going to happen ever. We're never paying that back. So the only way we fix it is by creating some form of New York State currency. So that and that's a cryptocurrency, some type of New York State coin to pay off local state debts locally in New York State, leaving the dollars to pay off our other debt. There's no other possible way of fixing the debt, or we just go bankrupt. I mean, that's the other option, just go default and let America, the United States federal government write a big check and pay off our debt. I don't see any other way. I don't see us going back to gold in a state. I mean, not a country with a Fed.
No, it can't happen at the state level. Unless the only way it can happen at a state and national level is if gold is dramatically revalued upwards.
Okay,
that's the only way. In 1980 when gold spiked to $850, the U.S. gold reserves matched the value of U.S. debt for a brief moment in time. It was when the Iranian hostage crisis and Reagan and all that was going on. And, if for something similar to happen today, for US gold reserves to match US debt, I don't even know what the figure is, Larry. Right. I used to look at it and stare at it and dream about it because I own a lot of gold. But an ounce of gold would have to be, I don't even know, $50,000.
Sure.
Something stupid.
Right.
And it is, and there's a chap called Jim Sinclair who argues that gold is nature's way of bringing bringing balance to the US, to the major currency of the world, the major government of the world's books.
So you're talking about gold, but you're saying we probably won't go back to gold. You're talking about cryptocurrency, but we can't really do it at a state level. So I have a question. James says this.
I just think they're all.
Hold on, Dominic. James asked a very serious question here. You consider yourself a futurist. You speak on the future of tax and work and money. You speak on this stuff. What do you say someone who's young like James, who's growing up with this gloomy government? Is there a future for youngsters like James, or should he just pack it in and move to Botswana and hope they do the land value tax there? What should he do?
Well, it's very easy to be very pessimistic because we are more aware than we've ever been. We have more media. Imagine if in 1914, when everyone went into World War I, and you said nobody knew why they were fighting that war. Now imagine if in 1914, all those soldiers had smartphones and they all went into the trenches and they videoed what was going on in the trenches. That just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, agreed.
Have happened. And this proliferation of new technology, even though governments are trying to stop it and regulate it and censor it and all that stuff that's going on, it's just making stuff transparent in a way that it's never been transparent before. So there's this huge awareness that didn't exist before. And the bottom line is, like, the later you were born, the better it is.
Okay.
Because just life gets better. And I know we've got a host of problems. And the biggest problem that we have at the moment is the rise of authoritarianism.
Yep.
You can call it socialism, you can call it Marxism, you can call it wokeism, whatever you want to call it. This is the biggest problem. But libertarians are winning the argument. And, or you can call it alt-right or whatever word you want to use, but they're just winning the argument. You look at the UK, the Guardian newspaper is like the sort of champion of the left, the wokeism. It's our equivalent to the New York Times. It's had to sack loads of workers and it's lost a fortune in COVID.
Yep.
Whereas the right-leaning papers, the Spectator and the Telegraph, have been able to return their furlough money because their subscriptions have gone up. And so there's this silent majority, and good sense is winning the argument, even though there's all this noise. And I really do worry about what's going on at the moment. It's just insane, some of the stuff that's happening. I really do worry. But there is, because of technology, whether it's phones or the internet, whatever, there's this accountability there. And so for young people, I would stress, you have more opportunity than at any other time in history. You have greater technology. Life is better than it. You're going to live longer. You're going to eat better. You're going to have more luxuries. Where perhaps you're not going to be as well off as in the past is in, family structures and social structures and that kind of thing. That's where we need to sort stuff out. But there's this sense that people are realizing this, and life does get incrementally better as we advance. And so, and even
but you do have some good advice. You have some good advice in a video you recently put out for how people should act. They should act kind of more like a chicken. Am I right?
I did this this evening this week.
When something's pissing you right off and it's left you vexed and blue, some arsehole's gone and spoiled your day and there's nothing you can do. You're in the dumps, morose and sad, some bad news just came through. Look to our friend, the chicken, she'll show you what to do. She goes up, off, 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 off.
That sounds like some decent advice. We should act like the chicken. When things happen, just tell people.
Learn from the chicken.
Learn from the chicken. I think that really is our answer. I really believe that of everything we talked about today, that's probably the best one. Of all the things we discussed was that one right there.
Like, the life of the chicken is the worst life you can. Everyone's trying to eat you. Everyone's trying to kill you. The chicken always loses. Like, you think you're losing, the chicken loses more than you do.
Absolutely true.
Last word.
Absolutely. Well, Dominic, I want to say thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate the time that you gave me. I know it's midnight over there in the UK. Thank you so much for all that you did. The people really loved it. We had a lot of back and forth. I hope, and again, guys, pay attention. Head over to his YouTube page. Head over to his website, DominicFrisby.com. Support him. Let him know you care. Bug him with like some emails and stuff just to keep him busy because I know he's bored. So do all those things.
All you have to do is watch my videos on YouTube, subscribe to my channel, and share them. That's all you have to do.
There we go. Easy day. Just like, comment, and share. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I will see you all. Actually, I'll probably see most of you actually on Monday, but maybe tomorrow some of you I might see. So anyway, have a good night, guys.